First item we have on our agenda is a presentation by members of the public on matters not otherwise on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of the commission. Is there anyone here this evening? I don't have any cards to speak on this item. Is there anyone here that wishes to address the commission on an item not otherwise on the agenda? All right, thank you very much. Consent, we have two items. Consideration of the expenditures for the Port Security Grant Program and approval of the May 15 commission meeting minutes. Do I have any issues on those? Otherwise, I take a motion to approve. Second. Moved by Oscar, mumbled by Oscar, seconded by Christopher. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, number 4, first item we have here, this is a presentation on the Garamendi Water Plan. And who is going to be leading us? Oh, yes, Aaron, okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the Commission. This item was actually brought up by the Commission as a request.
Yeah,
for
that's a good question. I think we have.
Anyone else work for the city?
We have some responsibility to establish your credentials as an expert witness.
This is the wrong item for that.
Yeah. I know you drink water. Okay, so that's all right. So you just been qualified as an expert on these things.
Okay, this item is following up on a request from the Commission for information on the Garamendi Water Plan. Let me start by just giving a brief background. The Bay Delta Conservation Plan is being promoted by the state administration to meet statewide water demand from population growth and agriculture, mostly from Southern California, but also to protect Delta habitat. It's a very controversial plan due to its physical effects on land around the proposed water intakes and a 40-mile tunnel. And as you can see from the graphic, the top part of the legend is the Bay Delta Plan. The green line is the proposed tunnel. And as you know, it's generated quite a bit of controversy as it's moved through the process. Critics also say that the Bay Delta Plan doesn't do enough to create new water through increased storage and recycling conservation efforts. So in response to the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, Congressman Garamendi, who represents the area that is arguably most impacted by the Bay Delta Plan, released a document called A Water Plan for California, which is attached to your report. Both criticized the Bay Delta Plan, but also provided some ideas for alternative means of addressing the state's water supply issues. Unlike the Bay Delta Plan, the Garamendi Plan poses some very direct and potential significant impacts on land use within the city and future operations of the port because of its use of both city and port facilities. And I wanted to stop here to point out that the purpose of this report is not to evaluate the merits of either plan. Really what we're trying to do tonight is just make you aware of the Garamendi Plan, its potential impacts to the city and the port based on a team of staff working to evaluate those potential impacts, our initial analysis anyway. So the features of the Garamendi Plan are essentially to use a one intake system, so less water movement to address the water supply issues, and more along the lines of conservation, recycling first before water conveyance is looked at. But it's that piece of the plan that is concerning to the city and the port. Mainly because it proposes a water intake at the Stonelock property. Now in your report, starting on page 2 and on page 3, we outline the list of concerns, at least initial concerns that staff put together. Obviously with Stonelock, that's a big deal. The type of intakes that they're looking at to deliver the water volume, the footprint of those, at least in the Bay Delta Plan, they're talking about 40-acre footprints, 6-story structures. These are massive facilities. Obviously would have a huge impact on the ability to use Stonelock for the city's intended purpose, which is to do a mixed-use development at that site. So that's the main concern first with the intake facility. Other projects that could be impacted, obviously the Pioneer Bluff Bridge the city's about to start construction on. There's some question of how this intake facility would work with the footprint of the bridge or the landing of the bridge. So that's a major concern of the city, of staff. Inconsistencies with city zoning and land use plans, I already kind of mentioned that, both on the Stonelock property, but also considering the Pioneer Bluff area. It's kind of the city's next waterfront area to focus on for infill development, and how would a water intake facility located that close impact our potential there. Property ownership is an issue that was raised only because in the Garamendi plan, it incorrectly refers to Stonelock as owned by the federal government. It's actually owned by the successor agency to the redevelopment agency at this point, which is controlled by the city. Then issues related to the Deepwater channel. The plan would propose to use the channel as the water conveyance facility from the intake down to what they describe as a shipping lock at the end of the channel, and then a tunnel, about a 12-mile tunnel. And what I've visually depicted here is kind of our best guess of what the plan described. What it says is a 12-mile tunnel under the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers to link to the existing system of canals and whatnot that lead to the Jones pumping plant. So that's about 12 miles. We don't know exactly, or we don't know if they know exactly where this would be. Seems highly conceptual at this point, but the main concerns with the use of the Deepwater Ship Channel are impact to maritime operations. We're not really sure if you're conveying drinking water down, and agricultural use water down the channel. What does that mean to shipping? Can you still have ships coming up and down the channel for maritime use? Maintenance, dredging, and flood protection are some major issues, not just for the port, but also for the city on the flood protection point. Increasing the flow down the channel. It's kind of stagnant water right now. It doesn't really, have a major current, but pumping water down the channel obviously would affect that. Would have some erosion effects and probably require some increased maintenance dredging to maintain maritime operations, and also strengthening the levees along the channel to protect the city because of the effects of erosion. There are concerns about delta protection, which it really sets out to address by trying to avoid some of the impacts of the Bay Delta plan. But the habitat for some of the fish species that are endangered is not just the delta, it's also the channel itself. And that was an issue that came up during the evaluation of the channel deepening project. So it's just something that we feel is sort of an oversight in the Garamendi plan. And then finally, the channel depth issue. We feel that any plan that proposes to use the channel should also include provisions for channel deepening in its basic terms, but also other benefits to maritime shipping. So regular maintenance dredging, those sorts of things, and also, frankly, we would expect that if the use of city property and port facilities is part of the plan, there should be some sort of compensation, and it doesn't really address that issue. And it's meant to be, I think, a conceptual idea at this point, so it's hard to really get into the details on it without more information. There hasn't been any follow-up from the initial release of that white paper. There are no maps or anything like that, so it's very hard to evaluate it as an official proposal at this point. But what we tried to do in the staff report was at least outline some of the high-level concerns both the city and the port would have if this sort of solution was actually considered. So with that, I'll answer any questions, and if there's any direction from the commission on follow-up on the Garamendi plan or the Bay Delta plan, we'd be happy to take that.
Questions, Mark?
So where is this in terms of, right now it's just been a proposal. I haven't heard much more outside of that. Is there any movement?
Yeah, I probably should have started with our sense is that the Garamendi plan was introduced as a direct result of the Bay Delta plan's effect on the affected areas in Garamendi's district. Obviously, it's a huge impact on that area, and I think the way it was described in the white paper, this is just one component of a larger proposal, and it was thrown out there as one idea would be to use the channel. So that's all we know at this point in terms of what is in the paper.
Is it being lobbied at all, you know?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Other questions?
If I may?
Yes.
Sure, thank you. Is there, have you considered, staff considered writing a response to Congressman Garamendi, explaining that we have many questions on our side, and some of the issues you raised are the ones that we need to articulate, that there needs to be more thought, and even maybe talking to us the next time he wants to propose something like this in advance, rather than seeing it in a white paper might be a good idea.
I think that's the point of our presentation. Chair McGowan asked us to analyze the plan, and Aaron has contacted several staff folks to put this together and then identify some concerns. So the next steps, I think, would be up to the commission.
Yeah, we also consulted with the county. I meant to mention that as well, with county staff to get their feedback, and they sort of concurred with our analysis on our impacts. But if that is a direction from the commission, we can put together a letter, whatever direction is.
Where on the map, the outfall from the regional sanitation plant is?
It's just south, yeah, I was gonna ask that.
Is it?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know.
I mean, because I don't remember exactly where it is either, whether is it in the city of Elk Grove? Well, it can't be in the city if it's on the water, because
You're right,
Elk Grove
it's
isn't
just
about the
south-
water.
It's just south of the city limits, it's Stone, what the,
Stone Lake's on the right.
Yeah, it's right in the Stone Lakes area.
Because one of the issues for regional sands discharge permit is dilution. So the extent to which you pull water out of the river prior to the outfall. So if you move the point of diversion farther north, depending on where the outfall is, you could have implications for the ability of the regional sanitation district to meet its MPDS requirements on the discharge.
I'd send an email to the city manager regarding that issue. Coordinate with the regional sand, because that's absolutely right, and so I'd send an email regarding the coordination of the letter and the response, because I think one of his recommendations, and he's right, let science, we need to use some science here and not just simply kind of nilly-willy the thing, and that is what we're trying to do as well, so we need to coordinate the response to ensure that if we get into that level of detail, which I don't know if we need to, but we're certainly coordinating with the regional sand, because that could have a huge impact. I mean, we're in the middle of negotiating our next permit. We're 5 years into it, well, 2 years into it, I think, already. And so we're trying to let science drive a lot of the discussion.
Did the regional sand take this issue up?
We've not, no, not the Garamendi plan, no. We've got plenty of other issues related to the permitting process, but we've not taken up this yet. We have not.
I haven't raised this much with the regional sand for a couple of reasons, but one of them is I wanted to have us here in West Sacramento, both at the city council and here at the port, look at this first and have a discussion about it. And just for the record, are you aware of any contact that the congressman's office made with us prior to the prep? I had not had a conversation with him personally about this prior to. I'm wondering if he had consulted with you or any of your staff before he prepared and rolled out his plan.
No.
Okay.
And it's my understanding in terms of the likely coalition, he has no outreach.
Okay. Well, if I may, I'll certainly defer to other comments or questions, but I do think it does warrant a response directly to the congressman to raise the issues pretty much as you have outlined them here. And it's a bit of a challenge because, to be blunt, it's a white paper. It's almost more of a political piece than it is a engineering or an environmental analysis. And I understand it, and I don't necessarily disagree with perhaps that tactic in principle. And so, in some ways, nothing may happen as a result of this. And so we're sort of faced with the option of just ignoring this on the assumption that it's just going to fade away, or being concerned that as with so many other things in our business, is once somebody sort of puts something out there, its lasting power is like indefinite, and then it becomes scripture. And all of a sudden, after it looked like we weren't going to have to face a west side diversion point and conveyance route, now he's resurrecting that by recommending this alternative. And so that's the part perhaps that gives me the greatest concern, is that all of a sudden we're shifting from where, the argument about over the east side, and now we got to defend the very heart of West Sacramento as a potential diversion site. And for folks that are listening or wondering what the heck we're talking about, you know, they're talking about 3 large diversion pumps. Each one is 3,000 cubic feet per second out of the river to go into these tunnels or canal to take water to the south. And to put that in perspective, if you take a ride down the River Road down around Clarksburg and the Freeport Bridge, you'll see a very large water intake project on the Sacramento side. It's for East Bay Mud. And it's huge, and you should drive down, take a look at it if you live in West Sacramento, if you want to see what might be coming to the middle of West Sacramento. And that project is 300 CFS, or cubic feet per second, 300. And the one that we're talking about in the Scaramundi plan is 3,000. So it would be 10 times the size of the one that's on the river currently. And so that's why we're concerned about it here. That in and of itself is a challenge for us to locate anywhere in Yolo County, but certainly to locate it right in the heart of, or virtually the middle of West Sacramento on the Pioneer Bluffs at the Stone Locks Bridge, if that's in fact where it would be built and could be built. I mean, it would be disastrous for West Sacramento. Not even if you could use the Deepwater Channel, even if the canal or the Deepwater Channel could remain for navigation, even if the locks down at the very end could be done in a way that doesn't cause us an arm and a leg. So there are a number of things that are problematical that he raises as theoretical or hypothetical alternatives to make his point. Now, his point that there perhaps could be one pump instead of 3, and that there are alternatives out there, and that the response to this whole Bay Delta Conservation Plan is to look at more comprehensive approach, which includes the pumping, of course, but also more conservation, storage, things of that nature. We certainly agree with. I agree with, but simply because, or primarily because, he puts a pin in the map, and it's in West Sacramento, and then draws a line down the Deepwater Channel and includes this lock at the end. I think we have to at least raise our hands and say, as we understand it, those things would be a problem for us because, and then we would certainly appreciate more dialogue with you about that. But as you propose it, as we understand your white paper, it is problematical for us for these reasons. I would definitely want a response, a respectful response. I certainly appreciate what he's trying to do, but I don't agree with the way he's trying to do it in this particular case. So that would be my hope. Mr. Cabaldo?
I agree. I think we ought to communicate to him, but particularly to our own member of Congress,
Yes.
To Congresswoman Matsui, about this, to our 2 senators, to the Delta Commission, which has taken a position against the administration's plan. They should
Yes.
also say this one is no good either. Right? I mean, so there are a series of those parties. I think that we should just make it clear that we're not. I don't actually want. I mean, I'm not opposed to meeting about it, but I don't know if inviting a discussion about it is really the point. Because to me, these issues and a whole lot more are pretty fatal. Right? It's hard to envision shipping actually working under that kind of a regime. I mean, it's not that you can't have shipping at all. I mean, we have shipping now, and that water does make it into the, ultimately gets to Clinton Court forebay, and the same thing from the Stockton Deepwater Channel. So it's not like it's complete. It's not incompatible, but if this were to occur, then all of those provisions from the Delta Stewardship Council that we were concerned about before would really hit hard. And so even the staff report that identifies sort of the land use and zoning issues being mainly around the Pioneer Bluff, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because suddenly all the decisions that we make around land use and zoning become related to conveyance, which was one of the carve-outs. We're protected from the Delta Stewardship Council's appeal process by the blueprint and the Regional Metropolitan Transportation Plan, but with exceptions, and one of those exceptions is where it's sort of essential to the conveyance system. And so if the conveyance is running right through the city, the impacts on our local land use authority and our zoning would be enormous. And so I think, that this is it's a huge, to me, it's hard to imagine how this could be anything but a non-starter for us. And I think we should calmly just simply make it clear that this is a no-go for for all the reasons that have been laid out, that Mr. Ledesma said as well, and then move on, unless it gets legs, which you would know better.
Well, I appreciate your response. I guess was trying to be somewhat more diplomatic, and maybe more diplomatic than it deserves. I would support the approach you're talking about, and I am afraid it gets legs. I've just been around too long that the minute you assume something's just going to fade away, the next thing you know, somebody's quoting it in a committee hearing as if it was the Bible, and you're going, holy cow, that thing was a stupid idea to begin with, and all of a sudden it's the party line. And we don't want to see that happen on this issue.
Yeah, I'd agree, and we don't want it to get legs, obviously. I don't want to give it the air to breathe to get legs. So it is, for all the reasons you articulated, Mayor Cavalden. But the other part, too, is to respectfully provide to Congressman Garamendi on this issue is, there was just an article this week, I think it was this past week, on the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, where Yolo County was lauded for being unified in its approach to kind of confronting these issues, and for this issue to kind of pop up on us shows a kind of a break in that unity we've had that I've sensed. I know on the Yolo Habitat, for instance, program, we've been working on the conservation piece, on the mitigation of species piece, which is how do we work with the BDCP when they're talking about bringing thousands of acres of mitigation into Yolo County when we're trying to mitigate our own projects here. How do we, and we've been unified in that front. So I'm afraid that this is could lead to I don't want to say a chink in our unified front, but I think it would be helpful to suggest to Mr. Garamendi that for the reasons you articulated, to have an entire conversation with Yolo County about the best approaches. I'm not opposed at all to conceptualizing other opportunities, because we shouldn't say no without constructive criticism of what we could do. But we have to be involved in the conversation, and to suggest that he can put down the intake in the middle of our city is just not the proper way to do it.
Well, Commissioner Cavalden does make, I think, maybe one of the ultimate fine points on this is that in addition to, or besides all of the sort of the physical problems that this would pose, it is throwing us into a whole new legal, undoubtedly a whole new legal situation or regulatory scheme that we're presently not in. It would, every time we wanted to do a setback on a fence in West Sacramento, you're going to wind up going to you could be appealed to the Delta Stewardship Council, and right now we've worked hard to avoid getting swept into that vortex. So yeah, the more I'm hearing about it, the more I think pointed we need to be in our response.
I mean, I think we can have a diplomatically stated firm no. I mean, I think both we and Yolo County, as Mr. Ledesma has said, have been in the position of, look, we're open to looking at solutions, and we're working on various aspects of those. That doesn't mean it's incumbent on us to come up with the solution, right? I mean, I feel totally comfortable being able to say no on this, because through our work in the Delta Commission and BDCP and everything else, this county, this community has not just said, even though we might feel this way, we don't want all the water going to Southern California, we're not going to talk, but we have been. Because I think representing the Delta, both through the county and a little bit through the city, I mean, the Delta is broken, right, for habitat, for everything else. So something has to get done, and we've been very clear-eyed about that and prepared to work on solutions. It's just this one is clearly not that solution. And I think we can say that, sort of adult, we don't need to be like throwing a fit about it, because it's not gone anywhere yet. And then start, go back to the drawing board.
Aaron, do you? I'm sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
More comment?
Yeah, I think I'd support that as well. I think it's important to go on the record at this point. But I'd also maybe also support the ideas of conservation, recycling, and new water. I think those are laudable goals for this. But flatly, there is an issue with West Sacramento in this. We need to go on the record. Legitimately important to us, and not let this thing sit and possibly come up with a
And just a question, so in terms of the coordination with the regional sanitation district, because it could have, as indicated earlier, some significant effect relative to the lawsuit, the permit, I mean, the MPD is permitting process that we're in the middle of now, so I don't know if we would want them to sign on to the letter, if that's bigger than what we need at the moment, or at least coordinate with the district to see whether or not they have the same concerns. It seemed obvious if you start pulling water out north of the Elk Grove site.
I think, well, here's my personal feeling is we should get this out sooner than later, and we should share it with, as the mayor has said, we should share it with a wider distribution. Certainly all those people that have been greatly involved, they need to know how we feel about this, and because he sent this plan out to that wider audience. But make sure that regional sanitation is aware, and advise them, and give a copy, and let them know what we're doing, and certainly and then we may get back to us for further discussion at our level on the board. Okay. Aaron, do you and Marty have enough?
Well, Mr. Chair, do you want this letter to be prepared for your signature?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay with me. You betcha. Unless somebody else is dying to do it, but I'm happy to do it. And I did, by the way, as Commissioner Walden has raised the question about other members of Congress, I have had a couple conversations with Congresswoman Matsui, who is our congressperson, and so she's aware of this, has her own, I guess, her own some sort of subset of questions about it as well, and will be understanding about our response. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I didn't have any cards on that one, so we'll go to number 5. Consideration of a port budget for 2013-14. And who's the budget expert?
That'll be,
That's our water expert.
let's not use the word expert.
Our Delta water expert is going to do the budget.
Ah,
Okay, so we,
Let's get a different hat or something.
we are required under the Harbor's Navigation Code to present to the commission in June a budget essentially, and we're also tracking this or timing it with the adoption of the presentation of the city's biennial budget, which you'll have a workshop, or the council will have a workshop later tonight. So I wanted to start with just kind of outlining the budget model assumptions before we get into the actual budget. This budget assumes the implementation of the SSA lease agreement that was approved by the Port Commission. I can report on that we fully intend to have that agreement executed and in place by July 1st. All indications are that that's going to happen. So what that means is the port would now receive a $650,000 a year lease payment. There's also some one-time revenue and debt relief associated with that. Beyond that, we are modeling this budget on very conservative revenue projections. There's no speculative real estate revenue, only what's under contract. No assumed cargo revenue. You'll recall that the SSA lease agreement has a 25% cargo share of revenue over $2 million. For this purpose, we're assuming 0. Although based on the current year, there would be almost $40,000 or so that would have come to the port on current revenue. There's conservative vessel fee projections. We have a provision in the lease agreement that gives the port a 25% share of the environmental fee that SSA will charge. And then also no additional foreign trade zone revenue, although we will be marketing that program a little more broadly and hopefully generate more fee revenue from that. There's also conservative expenditure projections. And what I mean by that is we're not assuming any additional operation savings. One big point that we've been working on is our insurance costs. As you'll see, that's a significant cost for the port right now. There may be opportunities we're looking at with the new lease agreement to reduce those, so we're going to be pursuing that. But for the purpose of the budget, we're assuming the current costs. Same goes for debt retirement. We're using the current debt service schedule, although any revenue that we do receive, we'll be looking to further reduce the debt to result in interest savings. So getting right into the numbers, this is the summary sheet that was provided in your packet. What I wanted to do with this was not just show the 2-year budget, but also a longer-term cash flow model for the port. Given the new lease structure, it does have a 5-year initial term, so I wanted to show you what it would result in terms of the new model. But we're going to focus tonight really on the first 2 years, that is the budget that staff is requesting the Commission adopt. So just going through very quickly, I'm gonna go kind of down the list of each category, and then explain, the various, operating profit into your balance and our structural deficit situation. First, on real estate, this is just a list of the real estate revenue that we currently receive. We're adding the SSA master lease to that total. So this is from the North Terminal. This second table is from off-site real estate, including the CIMEX, and Agrium leases and the rail fees. So the total in real estate revenue for the next 2 fiscal years is 1.6 to 1.5 million. The reduction, as I mentioned earlier, is only based on not using the assumptions that our year-to-year leases will renew. We do have several tenants that operate that way. They have a track record of renewing their leases from year to year, but we don't want to assume that going forward. So that's the main reason for the reduction. As I mentioned already, the other revenue the port receives would be cargo revenue, but again, we're assuming nothing. And like I said, there would have been about 37,500 from the current year. Again, the environmental fee, we're only assuming about a 5,000 per year revenue amount. It's tonnage based, and we will be involved in the development of that fee that SSA will collect. But we do intend, based on what is currently collected by SSA for environmental fees, that 5,000 is a safe estimate. We actually expect it to be significantly more, but until we have that fee in place, we want to be conservative. And lastly, the foreign trade zone, we get a little over 19,000 a year in revenue from the 3 users of that program. If we're successful in expanding it through additional marketing, we would hopefully add some long-term revenue to that program. And as I'm going through this, feel free to stop me for questions, and then we can do more at the end. On expenses, these are grouped categories of the numbers that you see in the staff report. As I mentioned already, insurance is really the port's single biggest cost at this point, over $300,000, and that includes both workers' comp insurance, but the main insurance is our general liability property insurance. And we're hopeful that with the new lease agreement, we'll be able to reduce our excess coverage, which is the amount that really is based on the condition of the facilities, which is kind of your additional coverage that your insurer would require because of the condition of the facilities. So it's quite a significant number. We're hopeful that we can reduce it based on SSA's own insurance, since they're the leasee. Personnel, we have reduced the number of staff that are paid out of the port fund down to 1.75. I believe the previous number was about 6.5 positions. So there's a port business manager and a 3/4 senior clerk included in that figure. The other categories are, as I said, grouped together. But the only one I will point out from this list that kind of ties to the lease agreement is the flood assessment. Right now, the port pays nearly $100,000 in the flood assessment. Once the lease is in place, that assessment will actually go to SSA based on the valuation of the terminal. So we're estimating that we'll be left with about $25,000. And then the other one is maintenance. We significantly reduced our maintenance costs because of the lease agreement, with SSA taking on the majority of the maintenance. So what this shows you is a subset of that same table. It's the operating profit for the port. This is not a net annual income or deficit or surplus amount. This is just taking the port's revenue minus its operating costs, but not including debt service or one-time revenue, anything like that. So you can see the port is running on an operating profit of about $646,000 in the first year, and then the second year figure is again reduced because of those leases that we're not counting as being renewals. So continuing on, the carryover balance from the previous year, and I'm sorry, that should actually say fiscal year 2012-13. We expect to carry over just over $600,000, and that amount is really from prior land sales that the port made. And in one-time revenue we have during the current fiscal year, we're making purchases on that port security grant of about $359,000. We'll actually get the reimbursement from that in the coming fiscal year, so it shows up in next year's budget. The expenses are reflected in the current year's budget. And then the $50,000 sale of air credits to SSA, that's actually provision of their lease agreement. The way that works is they're committed to purchasing the air credits within 1 year of execution. On debt service, this is the schedule that we have for the next 2 years. The big one is, of course, Taylor Village, and we still have the iBank loan, which runs out a number of years, and so does the city's loan as well. Right now, the city's loan is based on the amortization schedule you were presented with, I believe, at the last meeting. It's an interest-only payment for the first 5 years with a 20-year amortization after that. And that's from the loan the city made a couple years ago for capital expenses. And then the Sierra Northern Railway debt should be gone in 14-15. The way that works is as we get revenue from rail fees, it essentially goes to Sierra Northern to pay off the debt. Eventually that's gone. We think that'll happen next year. And once that happens, that becomes straight revenue. It's not a wash at that point. So the end of year balance, so this is the number that factors in the carryover balance from the previous year and the one-time revenue we expect to receive minus the debt service. So you see we expect to end the year with hopefully about $845,000 and then nearly $700,000 in year 2. So you see there's a decline in that, and that's kind of the next step here. This is the number that we really focus on. It's the structural deficit that the port still has, but as you can see, there's a downward trend. There's an operating profit, which is obviously a very good thing, because we struggled to have that before, but we still have the debt service, and until the debt service is reduced, and you can see in the 5-year model when that happens. Now focusing on the bottom part of that table, the structural deficit is projecting a decline until we reach an actual structural surplus in year 5. And that the primary reason for that is you see the debt service number. Taylor Village is paid off in 16-17, and all we will have left at that point is the iBank loan and the city's loan. And that's kind of the crucial point. So that leads me to, actually before I get to conclusions, I'll just point out the port also has a special purpose fund, and this is the general loan fund, or general loan from the city that was made for capital expenses a couple years ago. There was a $500,000 disbursement. There was actually authorization for a second disbursement of $500,000. We're actually proposing that the port not take that loan, and as a result of that, we have less debt service to the city. So with that $500,000 and the $10,000 per year capital/maintenance reserve that we have in the budget, there's about $510,000 available. We do have 2 kind of legacy expenses that are left over from the channel deepening project. We aren't quite settled on the number with PG&E, so we're still working on that number. The other is a consultant contract that was still has to be settled for the other $48,000. So when you take out those 2 expenses, the special purpose fund will be left with a balance of about $130,000 in the next fiscal year. So my conclusions on the 5-year, or I'm sorry, on the budget is the next 5 years are the most critical to the port in terms of reaching financial sustainability. There is an operating profit, as you saw, but the structural deficit is still there. There is quite a bit of potential to raise additional revenue through, as the business plan recommended, through focusing on real estate, getting new lease revenue on the port's vacant properties, continuing to work on Seaway and our channel lands to try to get those properties ready for development to have long-term revenue. And I'll just point out that even with that positive outlook in terms of the structural deficit going downward, there's a very thin margin for error built in there. The port's lack of diversification in revenue is a concern. We have several large leases that make up the bulk of that revenue. So there is some concern about the lack of diversification of revenue in that sense. But with the new master lease in place and those other revenue sources continuing on, there is that 5-year kind of light at the end of the tunnel where we aren't projecting a structural deficit for the first time. So the recommended budgetary strategy as we go forward, both in the 2-year budget that we're recommending, but also beyond that, like I said, we want to do all we can to generate more real estate revenue. We're working on different strategies for that. We want to make sure that our spending reflects conservative revenue assumptions, that we're not making speculative expenditures based on the expectation of revenue going forward. to stay out of trouble in that end. And also using revenue, I call it unanticipated, but what I mean by that is revenue beyond what's projected in the budget to reduce that debt early. If we can pay off the Taylor Village, pay back the city, that would be the first priority that staff would recommend to reduce the port's overall operating cost. And then also, like I said earlier on the insurance and some of the other operating costs, that there could be other potential to reduce further. We're going to continue to look at that and hopefully not only keep the operating costs in line with our projections, but also hopefully reduce them further. So that concludes my presentation. I have this table I can leave up. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just say
Yes, first.
briefly, Rick Toff is not here. He's on a beach in Mexico, but both Aaron and Rick and our finance team put a lot of effort into this. This sounds sort of glossed over as, basic. This took a lot of work. It is conservative. One of the key things that we could control was our expenses. So this port enterprise is very, very tightly run now. There are we're unaware of any unnecessary expenses. While Aaron paints a conservative approach, I think there is some reason for optimism. Our new firm to manage the port is focused on cargo development. They have some leads there to diversify, move beyond rice. And then already, in terms of leasing property, we've had several discussions with potential companies who would like to lease property. So we are showing properties there. And as Aaron mentioned, our first priority would be to pay off the debt. Whatever revenue we get, we pay off the debt before we build up staff on our side.
Mr. Johnson and then Mr. Kowalski.
Aaron, on the foreign trade zone revenue, what is that? How is that generated?
So basically, I don't have all the details on this, but the way the program works is when a business applies to be entered into the program, they pay a one-time application fee. And then beyond that, they pay a yearly, which I believe is sort of a renewal fee to stay in the zone. And it's about $6,000 and some change per business. Right now, we have 3 of them. The zone is much larger than just the city. It's the entire, not just even the port district. It's a lot of the region. And we haven't been very active in marketing it to businesses within that eligible area. And it's mainly just due to, port has been busy, so it hasn't really been a priority. At least that's my take on it. And I think there is some opportunity to work with other regional organizations to do a better job of marketing it, and hopefully as a result of that, get some interest in getting applicants and getting more revenue.
Yeah, so it's not based on square footage. It's just based on a business, for example. So the idea would get as many individual businesses.
That's my understanding, right?
All right. Now, those businesses then, the way a foreign trade zone works, basically, it defers the tariffs.
Right.
While it's inside, there's value added, you can defer the tariffs. So it tends to be a business-to-business type thing, so it's not really a sales tax generator.
Right.
So really, to the city, so in terms of economic development, there could be businesses that utilize what comes in and out of foreign trade zones, but the foreign trade zones themselves are basically this fee on a business-by-business basis.
Right, and I believe there's one company in West Sac, our economic development staff do use it as an attraction tool, but it really is more of a regional benefit program, and that's why we're sort of shifting our focus to, are there other regional organizations that already do this work, and to put them, kind of use them as our marketing arm. So we're working on some different ideas there to how we can get something together to best market the program.
Great, thanks.
So the budget had the 1.75 FTE
Right.
staff allocation. How are we accounting for you and the CEO and the rest of the substantial amount of personnel resources that are
Right.
being used?
Okay,
Is
so-
that somewhere else in the budget?
It's actually, so there were 6.5 positions that, my position wasn't one of them, but there are, the 1.75 are paid out of the port fund. The other positions, like the ones you mentioned, are actually city funded positions, so they're not paid from the port fund. At least in the proposed budget, they're paid from other various funds within the city.
And why is that? Why are we, why are we not showing any in our budget as an enterprise fund, and why is it not being reflected as a chargeback
The primary reason is, I don't know if Phil wants to add something, but the primary reason for, in terms of modeling the budget, was that just the basic problem of getting expenses in line with revenue. Staffing was a huge part of that. And there was a large amount of staff growth in the previous years. We were trying to kind of rein that in and get it to a level where the people who are directly working on the port 100% of the time are the ones that are charged. Now, I want to point out,
I get it,
though,
but we're just pretending that we're not using those staff resources, and we are deploying, that we are borrowing some of the city's, best staff resources in order to do this work. It's not, we haven't actually reduced the amount of spending. We've just shifted over to the general fund, to the property and sales tax paying citizens of and businesses of West Sacramento, and I don't understand why we wouldn't just reflect that in a more transparent way.
yeah, the only thing, if I could just add really quick, the only thing before Marty jumps in, we did have an allowance for billable staff time in the budget. There's $120,000. It shows up as billable maintenance staff and billable security. Now, what you're referring to is a little different. It's the positions like myself and the port CEO. But we did account at least for the positions that we're moving back to, in this case, the Public Works Department. There still will be some work that they'll do for the port, but it'll be on a billable basis. So we did at least account for that.
And Aaron, Phil and Atish remind us that in the budget of my time, there's $25,000 annually that's billed to the port. Aaron's time is not. It's billed out of economic development, out of Fund 106, right. So more general economic development. You make a good point, though. I mean, if the port is to stand alone as an enterprise, we probably should, especially if we can continue to turn around, is to be honest in terms of reimbursing our cost, our true cost.
Yeah, I mean, if we're trying to get, we are getting on a solid financial footing. That would be the right time to true this all up properly, and for us, when we return to the city council and Mr. Christoph asks us, what's the subsidy from the city? And I mean, there can be one, but we should just, it's even fine if we say that this amount is our expense, and this amount the city is, gifting to us, but some recognition that that's occurring, as opposed to just pretending that we're not using an unnamed city staff person for all of our agenda items.
Right. Maybe I could just add a little clarification. The port is treated like all of the other non-general fund departments in that they get charged a general support allocation. So there is some charge for all of the city time that is used. It's based upon the number of FTEs, so obviously it's fairly minimal.
Sure, for like the payroll processing and all that stuff, right? Okay. No, that I get, but I think I don't see the downside to being.
I don't either. I think the Aaron Laurel line. I know we got Rick Toff covered, but maybe we should revise this to have be very transparent in terms of Aaron's time on this.
Yeah, we can try to figure out some sort of allocation methodology there. I don't know if you wanted to actually tell us that, but I think you heard that we have the at least 25,000. I didn't have reflected in the numbers, so I apologize for that, but the 25,000 the port CEO, we could figure out a similar allocation for my position.
At the very least, there should be something in the budget, even if it's an asterisk that says this budget does not account for time spent by so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, even if you can't put a number on that. Because if we're successful to the extent that we hope, then there will be additional revenues from increased cargo. I agree with you that your primary goal should be to put that back into debt reduction and debt, retiring the debt. But if we're successful, there may be a point where we actually have funds beyond that could be expended someplace else. And rather than run off and buy build a statue for Mike McGowan, you might want to see what else should legitimately be compensated for, such as additional times. You may not. You may say, no, we're going to take that money and we'll create a better recreational program or something. But at least at least you know that it's there. Yeah, I agree with the mayor on this.
I should say, overall, I think it's very good work. I mean, the budget and the presentation was excellent as well. The real estate piece, the only, I'm not even raising a flag, but just to say, to me, the goal is not to move as quickly as possible. If in 3 years we still have real estate that's undeveloped, that's not a failure to me. I mean, we ought to do that, manage our real estate in a way that looks to the long term of the port, whether that's creating the funds to do potentially the part of a partnership to do deepening at some later date, or generate an income stream for other purposes. That's all to the good, but I want to be careful that we're not feeling like we're in a yes, we need a strategy, but we don't need to be in an all-out rush to dispose of real estate ASAP and bring us a new deal every week. I mean, we tried that before, and part of the point of the master lease agreement was to put us on a footing where we weren't feeling like we were in a moment of desperation, especially right when the market's turning. So I mean, there's nothing about the budget per se, but I do want to be careful that we're not we're conveying the notion that we're in some sort of fire sale, and that we have to get some project on the ground in each square inch of the port's the property that the port controls. It's not necessary for the near-term budget for the reasons that you've outlined. And we need to be thinking about, okay, after the 5 years, what's the role of real estate in making sure that we're successful at that point? And that requires more thought than just let's do it all right away.
Anyone else?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree with the conversation about to make sure we account for the time and effort that our city staff is providing to the port, because and more for the reasons you articulated around being transparent and making sure we're all aware of the time being spent. But there's also the issue just in terms of just straight business management of this and making sure there's accountability to it. I think that the part I worry about is today you're able to be our water person and our budget person, and it sounds like you're taking on a marketing hat with economic development, but the economy is coming back, and the city will have its own demands, and we will have this expense side will increase hopefully we want it to in 2 to 3 years, because frankly I want Aaron to worry about the things on the city side that he should be, and we need to be clear about the fact that the port has to sustain itself in 2 or 3 years and have full-time people on board, and we need to be clear on that. So I think, and two, I worry about the fact that what led us to this point was we got into the business of the port business, and we as the economy shrunk and our city staff shrunk, we started putting people in other places. I worry about the fact that no one has you certainly have a clear accountability for the port, but it's sort of a mixed priorities for city staff and the port staff. Their priorities aren't clear. I mean, today they won't in 2 years when things start percolating more. That's what I worry about. That we need to have a sustainable economic model for the port. And I want to applaud you for the approach and where we are. We're at a great point. But we can't stop. We have to continue to be vigilant on the fact that now we need an implementation plan, because you're also, I was going to ask a question about further revenue. Who is going to work on that full time in the next 6 to 9 months and kind of get that up to speed? Who's going to create the commercial real estate marketing strategy and work with the outlying groups to make sure that gets marketed correctly? Who's going to do that? And those are just the questions, but I also associate that with on the expense side. People are going to have to be accountable for that, and it's going to be an expense, and I'm okay with that, but that's the next step out of this is the action plan.
Commissioner Ledesma, you will see that. We will come back with the strategic plan as it relates to our real estate endeavors, and I think it needs to be both short, medium, and long-term plan. And Rick Toff will be really overseeing port properties, and he is in this budget for that, and that is the focus, with SSA focused on the maritime aspect. Then Rick and our staff will be focused on the real estate, but we'll bring that back. We're not going to go in with a haphazard strategy. It needs to be thoughtfully put out. It needs to be put in the focus of being cargo related, so that we can capture that revenue sharing with SSA, and so we'll have that come back.
Just a quick comment and then a question. It seems funny, just conservative budget, and yet our staff are going to Mexico and beaches that usually work on the port, but no, I'm kidding. I like this conservative approach. I like the fact that if there are any revenues that could come in the next 5 years, I guess, we're going to certainly use those to buy down the debt. I do have a question on the debt, though, because the 821, I recall the last conversation we had about the debt, there was at least some acknowledgement that we still have some outstanding debt relative to the construction of Southport Parkway to some of the developers further south. And I didn't see that reflected in the budget, and I just was curious because I wanted to make sure we didn't miss anything.
Yeah, it's a reimbursement obligation for pre-built infrastructure, but it's not technically a debt on the port's books. It's actually based on when Seaway develops, there's a reimbursement that has to be repaid. So we are accounting for that in our Seaway analysis. We have staff dedicated right now to a kind of a master plan strategy for the Seaway property, and that point is being looked at and really honed in on to see exactly what that reimbursement means, settling on the numbers and figuring out, if we do this, what does that mean for the reimbursement?
For the south side. Got it. Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right. I think this is on for approval. Is that correct?
That's right. It's
All right. And do
adoption.
we have a motion?
Well, I'd move it with the adjustments on the Aaron adjustment and other conforming personnel changes.
All right, very clear, clearly expressed amendment and a motion, so, and is there a
Second.
second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I believe it's unanimous, and I would echo kudos for a good job, a very good
Thank you.
job. We're really making progress here, and for just all your work on this. You too deserve a break on the beach, but not until the other guy gets back, and you get caught up with a pile of stuff on your desk, and then we'll see.
all right. Thanks.
All right, item 6?
I'll make this one really brief.
See, surprise.
So this is your monthly update on the port implementation, or port business plan implementation. Mainly wanted to point out, I think I mentioned it earlier, on the progress on the SSA lease agreement. Would describe it as we're very close to being able to execute that agreement. We expect to be done with it and have it in place to meet the July 1st effective date. And once we get there, that takes care of the kind of the biggest implementation item of the business plan. A lot of the other ones, though, are related to finance and the budget, and based on the action tonight, we'll be able to report back next month on the effect of some of those things. The other items have been updated. If there are any questions on any particular one, I can take those and hopefully be able to answer it.
Sorry.
That's it.
I apologize. You're done?
Yes.
All right, questions? Okay, I just had a couple quick ones. I would just apologize for not paying complete attention. I was having a sidebar with Mayor Cabaldon. We want to make sure we follow up with our strategy to talk to the Sacramento side about the overarching agreement. I think neither one of us can remember what we were supposed to do about that, so. Pardon? Cerna was my assignment. Okay, fine, yeah. I just saw him too. Okay, so maybe we could huddle again on that one,
Okay.
Marty, because we need to get that going. And I do have some more comment on the real estate piece as we move forward. And it's this, I think this is where it actually can get interesting and really fun, and be very, very exciting. One of the things I think we did, just generally speaking, one of the things I think we did here with the agreement with SSA is to give us some time. And there's not this great urgency now to go cut, to balkanize the port or sell our seed corn or however you want to define it, but to really work on a deal, especially for the property in the south, that has some long-range ongoing benefits for the community, whether that be under the heading of the port or the city of West Sacramento, however we want to structure that or define that. And the mayor raised this issue, and I totally agree. I mean, I'm less concerned about something happening right away than I am getting what you want. Because it's not just, the development of that property is not just about what's in the best interest of the port from an economic development standpoint, but also ultimately what's in the best interest of the community writ large, how it facilitates us with jobs and perhaps other businesses that are valuable to to the community at large, and certainly jobs, you know, taxes, or whatever else we can work on that. So I'm just very generally suggesting that if you were looking for some sort of guidance about, you know, for me, about what you should be doing on property is, we have the luxury of a little time anyway, not a lot of time, but to really do it the way we want. I was talking about another project in a different context and yesterday, and basically said, look, we should get the project we want, not the project somebody wants to give us. And that's worthy of you know, that property is worthy of doing it right, and you know, having some fun, and don't feel quite so pressured just to bring us, you know, as the mayor said, you know, we've had that saying, look, here's, people come in thinking we're hungry, and they give us lousy deals, good deals for them, not so good for us, and now we're in a position where we can just say, don't bring those at all. We're thinking of something much bigger, so I'm excited about that chapter of the port that I see coming on real soon. All right, I apologize, I had one request to speak on that item. Tim, you still here? Slim Tim, come on up, brother. Movie star.
Moving
Got
fast.
the new do, new
Mr.
body.
Chair, Commissioners, Mr. Tuttle. Last meeting was kind of intense. I like the passion, man. It's cool. It's not bad. But what I do want to say is, on behalf of Local 18, I want to thank everybody involved with the business plan and pushing forward and trying to get this thing executed. I know there's a lot of work, a lot of due diligence in it, and a lot of added extra efforts. We appreciate it. We don't want that to go unknown or unseen. And as a spokesperson for 18, I look forward to growing this port. You know, look forward to having a great relationship with the commissioners and Mr. Tuttle and everybody else involved. And you know, we got a little negotiating coming up here pretty soon, and we'll get involved in that. And I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be exciting. On a lighter note, you know, everybody knows how we feel about the preservation work clause, so it doesn't need to be talked about anymore. But I think everybody's done a hell of a job. Worked hard and a lot of efforts, and I appreciate the transparencies, because they sure weren't there some months back, and then some pressure on it, numbers started jiving, and everything worked out in the end. So again, thank you, everybody. You know, thank you for all your hard work and everything. And I know Toph's not here, but thank him too. So, all right, guys, good job.
Thank you.
Tim, thank you. Those words mean a lot to us. We appreciate it. Anything further? Any reports, announcements, burning desire to
Mr.
share?
Chairman, just briefly,
Vacation schedules.
the regular scheduled meeting for the port is July 3rd. We'd like to move that to July 17th to coincide with the city council meeting in July.
It's good. You told me not to call you back if it worked. I didn't call you back.
And then lastly, SSA is holding Port Night on July 1st at Rayleigh Field, and if you haven't received your invitations, let me know. But that is set to coincide with the lighting, the cosmetic improvements that we're doing out with the Port of Sacramento sign. It will be lit, and then also the LED light on the grain elevator will be in place on July 1.
All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.